Welcome, everyone, to the Islanders Never Say Die podcast. I'm your host, TJ, and with me again, as always, is our NHL analyst and expert, the Grumpy Old Man. They say there's no shame in his game because he's always the same.
That's me.
Now, Grumpy Old Man, some Islanders news. I'm not sure if all the Islanders news is going to make you a happy camper, Grumpy, but obviously, most importantly, the Islanders have signed back Matt Barzal to a 3-year extension, $7 million a year. And they also have signed back Matt Martin, which we will talk about, I'm sure, in depth on this podcast, ladies and gentlemen, to a 4-year, $1.25 million deal, Grumpy Old Man. I want, right off the top, initial reactions before we bring Paige on and go ahead and do our Stump the Grump segment. I want to know initial reactions, Grump. I want to know Matt Barzal, Matt Martin. What are your takeaways?
I consider the Matt Martin deal is a massive fail, and it's 4 years at 1.5 per. We'll discuss why it's.
I thought it was 1.25, Grump. Is it 1.5?
1.5 million for 4 years for a 32-year-old fourth-line player.
Grumpy.
In a time period where you're going to have a flat cap for 3 years, and you have any number of players under contract for that time who can fill the same role. That's correct.
Grumpy Old Man, for the people who listen to the podcast and don't partake in the live stream, they will not see that right now you're wearing a New Jersey Devils jersey. What's going on with that, Grumpy?
I thought we were going to do the Paige segment first, get her out of the way so I can just get rolling, because you can't start me off and then cut me off and then go to something else. That's not working. Not today. Not this week. Not happening.
Well, you know what? Okay, in your words, Grumpy Old Man, we'll get rid of the Paige segment first and Stump the Grump. I hope she's coming with a massive word, Grumpy, that you have no idea about. But let's go ahead and bring Paige in, where she goes ahead and introduces myself and the Grumpy Old Man to new dialect and words that are used in a different meaning than what their original use is. Paige, we're bringing you in. I want you to Stump the Grump.
Okay, I'll be short and quick to it, so I can let you get to your rant today, Grumpy. So today my word is boot.
Boot. That's like you give somebody the boot. It's a type of shoe you can wear on your foot. That's another thing, a boot. If you have a broken, or if you have some type of foot damage, they put you in a boot. Can you put it in a sentence? Because I'm sure that my words, even though all correct, I'm sure there's some idiotic new meaning that makes absolutely no sense and has a perfect word already for it. But the millennials just figure, you know what? We're such losers that we have to invent words or change meanings of words because our lives are totally unfulfilled.
Well, I'll let TJ. TJ, what do you have?
Well, I'm thinking boot. I'm thinking kicking somebody out of the lobby, booting somebody out. I'm thinking just removing somebody. Is that accurate, Paige? Or what does boot mean in today's language?
Well, just give us a sentence first. Can you give us a sentence?
I'm so nervous. I'm going to boot.
Throw up?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Pathetic. You know what? We have a word for that. It's called puke, wrath, hurl, blow chunks. I mean,
well now we're going to boot. Okay.
You know what? How about we reboot and just get rid of that word? Bam! There you go.
That could work.
Oh, goodness. Well, thank you, Paige. You definitely stumped me, and you stumped the Grump. I'm going to have to go ahead and try to control the Grumpy Old Man today, because I can only imagine how angry he's going to be with, I guess, the deal Matt Martin signed. I don't think necessarily he's upset with signing back Matt Martin back, but the deal for sure. So thank you, Paige.
Yeah,
no problem.
That's right, Paige. Get out of town. We don't want to see you anymore today.
I don't want to hear any more yelling.
Too late.
No promises there, Paige. All righty. Now, Grumpy Old Man, I want to ask about the jersey. And it's unfortunate that people who listen to the podcast and don't get to see the live stream or watch it on YouTube afterwards, why in God's name, as an Islander fan, and on our Islander podcast, are you wearing a New Jersey Devils jersey? This is not the first time I've seen some of this insubordination, Grumpy Old Man. I noticed that you were wearing a Vancouver Canucks shirt just a few weeks ago. I want to know why you're wearing a Devils jersey now, Grumpy.
You know what? The more I've been thinking about it and the incompetence of Lou Lamoriello, that I have to think that there's a conspiracy theory afoot and that he's really still working for the Devils. Because why else would you sign a 32-year-old at the end of his career grinder, fourth line player, to a 4-year, $1.5 million per contract when you have a flat cap for the next 3 years and you have to trade young players just to be cap compliant while we keep and continue to give old players. I mean, honestly, this is almost like Goldman Sachs buying somebody out and giving them a big bonus for all the years they've given to the company. That's kind of what it's like. Because, and here's the thing, I like Matt Martin. I really do. He's a fan favorite. But he's 32 years old, going to be 33, and he's a fourth-line player. You don't pay your bottom players out there. You want to know why we have no talent on the top end of this roster? Because we continue to play the bottom 6 exorbitant wages. I mean, it's mind-boggling to me, incredibly stupid, but we continue to do it.
I will say, Grump, being a financier myself, I like how you're using the terms golden parachute, or you're making references to Goldman Sachs and golden parachutes, Grumpy. That always does make me happy. Wow. I will say this much. We were not opposed to the idea of bringing back Matt Martin, but as we had discussed, Grumpy Old Man, it would have had to be on league minimum or close to it, extremely close to league minimum. And it had to be maybe one absolute maximum 2-year contract. I'm talking about maximum 2-year contract. And we signed Matt Martin for a 4-year deal. And the part, I guess, that blew my mind is he's making closer to $2 million than he is to league vet minimum. I mean, $1.5 million, Grumpy Old Man. You're right. We don't have an exorbitant amount of cap space available, and to sign Matt Martin to that contract is, I think, a little irresponsible. Now, people are throwing out the idea, well, maybe we sign Matt Martin to this contract with term, so maybe we can offload this contract in him to the Seattle Kraken. I don't see it. I don't think that's going to be the scenario, but I have heard that as maybe that's the thought process Lou has. It's not a thought process I think he has, but it has been thrown out there.
Okay. First of all, I've heard scenarios too. I've heard scenarios that, well, maybe they gave him that much money and that much term because they wanted to keep the annual value down because there was going to be a run on 32-year-old fourth-line players who were at the end of their rope. Maybe he was going to get more. Well, I'm going to tell you what. If somebody offered him more money, bye-bye. See ya. No, I mean, you had an awful nice tweet earlier this week, which I thought was just perfect, honestly.
Yeah, I'm glad, Grump, I'm glad you reminded me. When I thought of it, as soon as I saw, I said, wow, it wasn't enough for Lou Lamoriello to overpay for Matt Martin once in Toronto. Now he had to go ahead and do it a second time in New York. So I thought that was a little funny. But Tommy does bring up an important point here, Grumpy Old Man. Now, if Martin down the line can no longer play at the same level, we can send him to Bridgeport and save $1.2 million. I will say that is obviously a big plus, Grumpy Old Man. And I think that was one of the important, pertinent parts of that contract. It does make it a little bit more manageable. If he does kind of lose that touch, if he does start slowing down significantly, you always can go ahead and demote him to Bridgeport. But my question being, Grumpy, do you see this regime ever moving a guy, a veteran leader like that, Matt Martin, down to Bridgeport? I mean, the only one I can think of is Thomas Hickey. And again, I think Thomas Hickey was crowded out. The younger defensemen were better. And I mean, he's a good number 7, but he was not suited to be a top 6 defenseman anymore. Okay.
You know what? We just could have let Matt Martin walk. Ross Johnston could have filled that role very nicely at a cheaper rate. He's already under contract. You save yourself $1.5 million towards the cap. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. And then you hear some of the other things where, they were looking at a 6-year deal. And, here's the thing. The Fossil, at least maybe, is starting to listen to the Grumpy Old Man a little bit more because he wanted to buy out, like I've been talking about numerous times, he wanted to buy out free agent years. They were wanting to work on.
Hold on. You're talking about Matt Barzal, Grump. You just jumped all over the place. We're still talking about Matt Martin. You just jumped to Matt Barzal. Okay.
Here's the thing. I'm trying to block Matt Martin out of my mind because, all I can say is when I think about why? We don't need Matt Martin at that contract number. And I guess I did jump ahead a little bit, but I do want to mention anything. There's also rumors that Andy Green is re-signing to right around the same money that Matt Martin was getting paid, 1.5 per, right? So that's the rumor going around that it's the same dollar value. Now, let me ask you a question. Do you look at what Zdeno Chara got for 1 year, right? $795,000. Why would you ever pay anyone more than that? Why would you not have gone after Zdeno Chara to tutor Noah Dobson?
Well, I think they like the chemistry, to answer that question straight up. I think they like the chemistry that Andy Green and Noah Dobson had towards the end of the year. To be quite frank, grumpy old man, I will say I have no idea what the dollar amount for Andy Green's contract is going to be. But you've seen a lot of these veterans, these extremely skilled or, once skilled veterans getting signed to very, very cheap deals. And to see Matt Martin signing a $1.5 million deal, and I can only assume, if that's true, grumpy old man, that we're probably going to overpay, and I'm using air quotes here, on Andy Green. But
okay, we overpaid for Matt Martin, right? I mean, let's just call it the way it is. If you didn't want to take a vet minimum deal, see you later. We're up against the cap. Where is he going? I mean, he's married to Boomer Esiason's daughter. They live in the area. Is he going to the Rangers? I don't know. Did the Rangers have money? I don't know. I don't even care. If he wanted to leave, let him leave. The fact, just giving over-the-hill players term and money it's just a recipe for disaster. I mean, this has Leo Komarov written all over it. I mean, it's the same type deal. 2 years from now, are you going to say, boy, that Matt Martin deal was really great? I mean, universally, I think it's acknowledged it's not a good deal. It's just dumb, especially in the salary cap, the way the salary cap is the next 3 years.
Well, Grump, I'm going to stop you here, right? The only safeguard against that, though, is if we go ahead and move him down to Bridgeport, we can go ahead and avoid $1.3 million off the cap hit. So, again, it's, at least there is a little bit of hedging our bets, or 1.3 or 1.2. I can't remember off the top of my head. But that is at least one way to hedge our bet, Grumpy. And now this is a point that I think is true that Brish Kingsa brings up here. Again, lose loyalty to Martin and the players that want to play for the Islanders. Sample as Martin, he has wanted to remain and retire as an Islander. So, yes, I think that he did pay for loyalty, and I think he overpaid. It's funny, right? You hear all the stories and you hear example of, oh, the guy took a hometown discount. Well, it seems like we gave the opposite to Matt Martin, where we overpaid him there for prior performance. And it doesn't matter what sport you're in. I hate when franchises and teams pay for past performance. It's something that I think sports organizations and franchises are moving away from, where they'd rather pay, and we see it in hockey, they'd rather pay the younger player more who necessarily hasn't performed yet, and they're paying for future performance rather than an older veteran, and they're paying for prior performance. It's just a different school of thought.
Yeah, that's the smart school of thought. Okay, I don't care how loyal you want to be to a guy. He didn't deserve the money that he signed. Here's the thing. He didn't earn the money that he was paid all those years when he left for Toronto. He didn't earn that money. So as far as I'm concerned, he was ahead. Matt Martin was ahead in money. Is he worth $1.5 million a year now? Absolutely not. Not in this climate, he's not. And you say, okay, you could save $1.2 million. Well, you know how you could save 1.5? By not signing him at all and just filling in with somebody else already on the roster. There was a viable option. Yeah,
Grumpy. And again, I guess I'm just trying to rationalize maybe their thought process behind it. I mean, Tommy chimes in here saying the Flyers also showed great interest in Martin. And again, they did. I think you brought up a good and valid point. And I think most Islander fans agree with this, Grumpy old man. You had Ross Johnson. 2 seasons ago, you signed him to a 4-year extension. Now that you signed Matt Martin to an additional 4 years, and what was the ideology there with bringing and signing Ross Johnson? And given it wasn't a huge contract, it was a 4-year deal, on average $1 million a year. But what was the point? Maybe you're hoping he was going to grow into that role. Maybe there's something you still don't like on the defensive side of the puck that he's conducting. I'm not sure, Grumpy old man.
I don't know.
But you definitely had a younger replacement who was on a cheaper term, or on a cheaper deal than that as well. So
I'm going to say it again. You had a replacement. You've neutered Ross Johnston's game to fit how you want him to play, and you still won't give him a chance. You still insist on signing the overage veterans to term. It's not even 1 year. It's the term, 4 years.
Grumpy, I forgot that I made you a little image. I forgot that I made you a little image of Matt Martin with some question marks. because you're questioning as to why the organization signed it to that 4-year deal. Honestly, it wouldn't have been a hideous deal. Again, I'm using hyperbolic speech. It's not a hideous deal. It's just not favorable, I don't think. It wouldn't have been a bad deal if you signed him to a 2-year extension, right? He's 32 years old. Realistically, how long do you think? And he has a lot of miles on his body. I would be shocked if he plays out the entire 4 years. I really would. I know his game style has changed a lot. And I think maybe the pay also was increased based off of his playoff performance. I think if he played, regular season Matt Martin that we saw last year, I don't think he's getting 1.5. I think he's getting closer to 1. And I think that because he played so well in the playoffs, I do think that bumped up what his salary was there. I do, Grump.
Okay.
Right or wrong, I think that's the reason why.
I don't care what he did in the playoffs. He scored 5 goals in what? How many games did we play? 18 games? I mean,
five goals and 1 assist. I think 1 or 2 assists, Grumpy, as a fourth-line player. I mean, that for a team that doesn't really score a lot of goals.
I don't care. That's a discrete event. Okay, how often does that happen? How often does it happen as an entire year, as an entire career? Last year, never before, and never again. I mean, like I said, I like Matt Martin, and I like the question marks because I could say, who did they sign to that contract? Matt Martin. Where? The New York Islanders? When? This week in this climate? Why? I mean, I don't understand. I don't know. There's a whole bunch of those W's, and I could apply every single one of them to Matt Martin in this situation right now. Every single one.
Oh, grumpy old man. I did make the little image, so I had to show it for you, Grump. Again, I think it's kind of a moot point, though.
What? I'm sorry. Hold on. What was the last one? What the hell are they doing? That's the last one. What?
Oh, goodness, grumpy old man. Too much pessimistic and chiming in. Grumpy's going to boot soon. Oh.
Very possible.
No, I don't think. Again, it's not optimal, but I do think the fact that we do have that AHL kind of, I wouldn't call it a workaround, but kind of that loophole, I think does help. Not a fan of the 4 years. Even if it was a 2-year contract for 1.5, it's more manageable. But I think moving to the most important topic, grumpy old man, the Islanders have signed back Matt Barzal. Applause. I'm happy. Again, it's not the ideal contract we all wanted, but still, Matt Barzal is signed back. He's going to start participating in training camp. I was really fearing out there, Grumpy. It looked like some Islander fans were about to jump off the ledge. I mean, they were getting close. They were really worried. Oh, Matt Barzal's not going to sign back. We're in trouble. And I can't remember who. I think it's Paul. I don't remember his last name. What was that, Grumpy?
Paul Bissonette does one of those commercials with Ray Whitney. He was okay. He was a bottom line guy, more of an aggressor type, a goon type, right? I mean, they show him in those commercials where, he shoots the puck hard and Ray Whitney doesn't, but Ray Whitney could hit the corners, and the only corners that Bissonette was hitting was like the corner of the boards, that type of thing. It's kind of fun.
Well, most notably, he's on, I think, Spitting Chicklets, which is a huge hockey podcast, Grumpy Old Man. And he talked about the situation Matt Barzal was in. He said, I would just hold out, get exactly what you're worth. Essentially, I'm paraphrasing, of course. But once he came out and said that, they started circulating around the internet. And oh my gosh, Grumpy, I know you don't have any social media or very limited social media, but that's when you saw the angst and the worry of Islander fans start to slowly tick up. And it was on an upward trajectory. I'm just happy they signed him back today, because Islander fans, I know some of them are really starting to worry that he might not be signed back in time for the start of the season.
Didn't Paul Bissonette also mention something about him not maybe wanting to sign because he wasn't having fun, that perhaps, he'd want to. And let me tell you something. I don't want to say that I've said that before, and maybe Paul Bissonette has been listening to our podcast in the archives, because that is exactly what I've said about Matt Barzal for quite a while now. And I'm in total agreement. He should have held out and held the screws to the fire, because he had all the power there, and he let it go. Now, that said, I was never concerned about him not signing. The contract negotiations were not acrimonious in any way. And I told the people, calm down, people. He is going to sign. I also told the people, Lou Lamoriello is not going to make any moves this offseason, and he's going to get caught with his hands in his pockets. Why? Because he wanted to sign him to a 6-year deal, making about what the guy in Colorado makes, Rantanen, right? Maybe 9.25 million. But he didn't have the money. You want to know why he didn't have the money? Because he didn't offload the pieces of garbage earlier in the offseason, like I told you everyone that he should have done. He waits, we have time. Well, they ran out of time, which is why he couldn't sign him long term. So now what happens, right, boys and girls? Here's what happens. He signs for a 3-year deal, $7 million per. There's no way he was going to get paid less than average Anders. I mean, even the fossil knows that he couldn't have paid him less than average, right? He knew that. So he gives him 3 years, $7 million per. So what does that do? It brings him 1 year from unrestricted free agency. So he will still be a restricted free agent. But here's the thing. Now it costs you a lot more money. But the fossil who called last week during the show to tell me, hey, grumpy old man, I should be listening to you. I'm going to try to get him that 6-year deal to buy out some years of free agency. How often have I been saying buy out years of free agency on these restricted free agents, right? And everyone tells me how stupid the grumpy old man is, right? In Lou we trust. Lou's the greatest. Lou's so smart. Well, guess what Lou did? He decided I'm going to do what the grumpy old man said to do. But I've messed up the salary cap so bad, I can't do it now. So what happens? Now, when he's got to pay him again in 3 years, he's going to have to really overpay for him, because then guess what? Now we don't have the flat cap anymore, and Matt Barzal is going to ask for less more money. Yet another failure by the fossil. F for failure, F for fossil.
Grumpy, I think next week I'm going to have to whip up a little image of Grumpy rant time or something fun so that the people who do watch the live stream can get a little chuckle of that. Because I know obviously the people listening afterwards and post on the podcast, they don't see me just smiling, laughing as you're just going on your rampage, Grumpy Old Man. That's all you can do, is just sit and smile when Grumpy Old Man starts going on a roll.
But here's the thing. I'm not wrong. I've been right on every single thing I'm saying. I don't want to pat myself on the back. I will right now, because I've been telling everybody, calm down, grumpy old man. Relax, grumpy old man. Lou knows what he's doing. Have patience, grumpy old man. You want to know what happens when you have patience? You get stuck with Komarovs, Martins, Lads, averages, Hickeys. All those guys still suck on the team, but you know we don't have Devon Taves. And then what do? We have to sign Ryan Pullock to a 2-year extension, right? That brings him right to free agency. So instead of being proactive on him, now if you want to keep him 2 years from now when he is an unrestricted free agent, you're going to pay through the nose. And that's why you cannot continue to make those mistakes. You don't sign the old guys to long-term deals, which hamstring your salary cap situation. You don't do it. But the fossil doesn't learn. He tried to learn here, but he screwed up so bad that, you know what? I couldn't get myself out of it. Hey, maybe we could trade 6 first-round picks and Thomas Hickey for a bag of pucks. Would anybody take that? You can't wait till the season is about to start. Like I told you, there's no money left, and no one's willing to take those players.
I will tell you this much, Grumpy. I don't necessarily agree with a lot of what you just said, but some of it for certain. I will say this. You were right, Grumpy Old Man, when you were saying that the Islanders were going to do nothing this offseason. You were right. Well, actually, I can't say that's right, because we did trade away Devon Taves. I mean, that's the biggest move we've made all offseason, and re-signing back players and bringing over Sorokin. But you said that Lou Lamoriello was not going to acquire anyone through free agency. And that, I mean, like, I think maybe Sarnak, was he a free agent or a trade? I can't really remember, Grumpy Old Man, dating this far back. You did say that, though, from the start. We did not add any big pieces to the team in the lineup. And again, I was optimistic. But you were right on that. I will give you credit for that, Grumpy Old Man.
Okay, I've been right on anything that you don't believe in what I said. It's because you're foolish.
Stop.
I don't want to call you stupid. I'm just going to say foolish, because everything I said is spot on accurate. Every single thing.
Grumpy Old Man, I don't want to feed you, but Scott's over here saying Grumpy on a rant is great.
But here's the thing, I ain't lying. It's not like I'm lying. It's like whoever does. I read, here's the thing. I read some websites about the Islanders, and I'm like, I mean, what are you Islander bobos? I mean, hey, I love the Islanders, but I'm not saying, in Lou we trust. Absolutely not. Do the job, Fossil. You're not doing it right now.
Grumpy Old Man. I'm going to say one thing. Paul, he comments this a few times. Grumpy calling anybody a fossil is laughable. I had to go ahead and pull it up, Grump.
He's older than I am, and I got more wits about me than he does. That's why he's the fossil.
I will say this, though, Grumpy.
I'm in a pre-fossilitic state.
I will say this, though, Grumpy. With Matt Barzal, I think getting him signed back important. It's pertinent. Without Matt Barzal, obviously, I think we are more of a fringe playoff team than with Matt Barzal. With Matt Barzal, I think we're a pretty safe bet as to making the playoffs. Without Matt Barzal, we lose a lot of that offensive creativity. We don't have a solid 4 centers in our lineup either and roster every single night. So Matt Barzal was a need. We had to sign him back. Ideally, you would have liked him to go ahead and execute maybe a 6-year deal, maybe even longer term deal than that. But you're right. He's definitely going to get paid in 3 years' time. As to how much, who can say, grumpy old man? But let's put it like this. It's a net positive that he is back with the team and organization. Wasn't the optimal situation only being able to sign him there to a bridge deal for 3 years. I will tell you, I don't get the John Tavares feels like, well, I don't have the John Tavares feels. I feel like I've seen in very, very select groups in sects of the Islander community, people are saying, oh, this has got John Tavares written all over it. I don't have those type of feels, Grumpy.
Yeah, I'm going to stop him right. Whoever says that, remember, when he comes out of this contract, he's still going to have 1 year of restricted free agency left. Okay? That's the difference. Now, he could say, I just want to sign a 1-year deal. And if that happens, you have to move him. Absolutely. Then it becomes a Tavares situation. And that's all going to depend on Barry Trotz. Are we going to continue to shackle him? You said we would lose most of our offensive creativity. I'm going to take it a step further. We lose all of our offensive creativity. We don't have any outside of Matt Barzal. Zero, nada, zip, zero, none. Okay? We need him. Okay? And which is fine. I'm glad they signed him back. And you also said we're a fringe playoff team. Without Matt Barzal, we are not a playoff team because you cannot make the playoffs when you score 1 goal a game every game. You're not going to shut everybody out.
Well, I know we're going to talk about Ilya Sorokin and what our expectations are for the White Whale. Grumpy old man, and Tommy also comments, I don't know. Can we wait to see what Bellows and Wallstrom have before judging this? I will say I'm bullish on Kiefer Bellows and Wallstrom, or at least giving them the chance and opportunity. I think this year it would be a colossal mistake if we don't give them an extended time period up there for the Islanders, up there for the New York Islanders, so we can actually see what they do have. I mean, like this is a time period where you kind of have to analyze: do they have it? Can they cut? Can they cut it? What it takes?
To me, both of those guys should be on the roster to start the season. And one thing that the Armadillo said, that's Barry Trotz.
The Armadillo.
He looks like an armadillo. I mean, come on, look at him. Don't tell me he doesn't look like an armadillo. He does. Okay. And the Armadillo said that this year the young players are pushing for playoff spots, for starting spots, where in the past they had not been. Well, you know what? If that's the case, fantastic. I'm all for it. We need to incorporate younger blood in here. But then it begs another question. Why are we continuing to sign older players to long-term deals? Because there's eventually going to be, what are we going to do with those players? There's only so many spots. I mean, I worry about that.
I will say this, Grumpy. We have a comment here from Alexander also saying Lamoriello deserves so much credit. Now, I will say this much. The biggest thing Lamoriello has done for this organization, it is hugely important, Grumpy old man, was he brought Barry Trotz to the New York Islanders. As much as we'll pick little parts of a Barry Trotz mannerism or an action that he's done on the bench that we don't like, Barry Trotz coming to the Islanders and Lou Lamoriello bringing him to the Islanders has turned this franchise around. There's no doubt about that.
He brought 2 things. Barry Trotz was by far his best move. Nothing else is even close for second. And all the ripping I do on him, he also brought a certain legitimacy back to the organization and respectability among the NHL, without a doubt. And like I said, and everyone knows I'm ripping on him when he does something stupid, but without him, we're not in the situation we're in. I'm not saying that Lou Lamoriello is the worst thing ever. He used to be great when he was with the New Jersey Devils. Okay. His tenure in Toronto was really not that good. They couldn't wait for him to leave, honestly, and hire some little pimply-faced kid to take his spot, right? And I'm glad he's here because, I mean, think about where we were before him and then, where we had Snow and Milbury. I mean, Maloney. I mean, all those guys. I mean, and where we are now, there's no doubt about it. He brought respectability and legitimacy back to this franchise.
I was about to say, and it's you can't even quantify how important that is for the Islanders. Remember, as much as we go ahead and we make statements about how things are now, it's just because we want them to be we want them to be a Stanley Cup competitor year in, year out, to be the absolute titans of the NHL. Now, I mean, if you look at where the Islanders were 2 seasons or 3 seasons ago, holy crap, Lou Lamoriello and Barry Trotz together have turned the image of the Islanders around for certain. I mean, again, I still think the Islanders get some undue
we are disrespected by the people and the pundits in the NHL. Absolutely.
We get undue lack of respect, or we do get a lack of respect, grumpy old man. And I think that's still there. It's going to take a while to break that. But I think they have brought and done a lot to turn the face and the image of the New York Islanders around. I mean, hell, if you look 3 years ago, I'm not sure anybody was always gung-ho about the Islanders. I mean, you have the fan base has also been extremely energized since they have joined.
I absolutely love the Islanders fan base. Absolutely. I mean, think about it. We've been – all right, I lived through the glory years, but most of the people who listen to this podcast have not been. I mean, those are loyal fans. When you stick with a team that's a perpetual loser, like we've been for the most part since, 1988, 89, right? Think about that. How many years ago? That's like over 30 years ago. We've had a couple of years of success, but for the most part, we've been really a downtrodden franchise, and the fans are always there. You've just got these are true fans. There are no bandwagon fans who are Islander fans. Even people who are starting to like the Islanders now. What bandwagon are you jumping on? It's like, hey, let's jump on that. We play a solid game in the neutral zone thing. I mean, I could see if we had Gretzky on the team, or Lemieux, or Bossy was back, goal scorers, and maybe Matt Barzal can have one of those type players. But I could see people bandwagon, oh man, he's fantastic. I love the Islanders. We don't have anything like that. If you're an Islander fan, you're an Islander fan, not a bandwagon fan or a Johnny come lately.
Yeah, a Johnny come lately, Grumpy. I love it. But yeah, you're right. We don't play a sexy style of hockey, Grumpy old man. So it's not conducive to bring on bandwagon fans for certain. I mean, if you're an Islander fan, the defensive structure and the slow methodical game and slow transitions, but very stingy style of hockey we play is not extremely attractive there to a lot of the newer fans of hockey who like games to be 6 or 7-6. That's not the style we play. Grumpy, I'm bringing this up just because it's funny. Tommy Baffy there is saying, TJ, should I bring up Hosang once to add to Grumpy old man's rant?
Why not? Why not? Because you know what? I found it funny. I was reading up on.
I shouldn't have showed that.
Oh, you did. You open that door. The door's open now, and that's fine. You know what? I don't mind walking right through. Okay, that's fine, right? Why isn't Josh Hosang in camp? Because we didn't think he had a legitimate chance to make the team of the practice squad. But here's the thing: they're bringing in Casper the Friendly Ghost is going to be on the. You know who Casper the Friendly Ghost is? Stop,
Grump. I've got to stop you. I know who. I think I know who you say when you say Casper the Friendly Ghost. I think you're talking about Simon Holmstrom. Is that correct?
Exactly. Look at him. Look at Casper the Friendly Ghost and look at his game. It's invisible. I mean, that's what he is. He's invisible out there. His name is Casper. That's forever now. Is going to be Casper. Casper Holmstrom.
I've got to stop you, Grumpy.
But here's my point. Here's my point. Yes. Do you think Casper has a shot to make this team? Absolutely not. Why are you bringing him into training camp? Why would you do that? It makes no sense. They should have brought Hosang up. That's what they should have done.
I'm going to stop you. I'm going to stop you, Grumpy. I will provide your answer. I'm going to stop you, though. I think Scott's right here. Lou has also changed the culture of this team. Grumpy old man. You asked me a few questions. I'm fine. You can refer to Simon Holmstrom as Casper. And I know what you're referring to, Grumpy old man. You're referring to the art. I mean, you watch the World Juniors, but you're also referring to the article that Corey Proman put out when he talked about the biggest surprises and the biggest, I don't think he used the word disappointment. I was going to say failure, but it was disappointments out of the World Juniors. And Simon Holmstrom was on that list. We had talked about it, the game style that he played. He was always around the periphery. free, didn't necessarily mix it up. He showed flashes, which I was saying the entire World Juniors, but he didn't really take control and wasn't dominant, right? He was 20 years old. He was overage. They thought maybe he would go ahead and show a little more. Didn't, in the limited amount of time he was in the World Juniors before Sweden got bumped out by Finland. Grumpy old man. To answer your question as to why Simon Holmstrom was invited to camp, if you don't think he has a legitimate shot of making it, I think it's the same reason why they bring some of the younger players that they really don't have an intention on bringing up yet. It's to give them that taste, and so that they understand what it needs to be done to make it to that next level, right? I know it's easy for us sitting back at home to think, oh, that's not really important. I'm going to tell you, Grumpy, I think it is. It's important there for those young men who are trying to elevate their game to the next level to understand what I'm doing here and to see tangibly what I'm doing here is not what it takes to be where I want to be. Now that I've been up there with, the Islanders organization during training camp, I got an opportunity there to play practice with the real professionals, with the NHLers. And I noticed that they do X, Y, and Z differently. I'm going to take what they do, and I'm going to try to apply that to my game here so I can continue to elevate myself as a player. I think that is important, Grumpy old man. You might not agree with me, but I think that's important.
Okay, I'm not disagreeing with you in that at all. It's the lame excuse that they gave for why Josh Hosang was not invited to camp, right? It was because they didn't think he could make the big team or make the taxi squad, so that's why he wasn't invited. There's no way that Casper is making this team or the taxi squad. Casper is going back where he belongs, down on the farm, okay? And he was absolutely invisible during the World Championships. Pronman, I thought, was glowing. He called him a disappointment. I call him a failure. I don't care that he scored 5 points. He had one play the whole tournament where he made a nice backhand pass. Other than that, he was the king of the secondary assist, part 2. He passed the puck to somebody. They do a whole bunch of stuff. Then they give somebody else. He do a bunch of stuff and score. And somehow Casper gets a Josh Bailey assist. That's the problem I have with it. You know what? If you don't like the kid, you don't want him playing for the franchise, just man up and say it. I don't even know why you signed him. You're never going to give him a shot. But don't tell me it's because he doesn't have as much a shot to make the team as Casper. That's all I have to say.
Grumpy old man. I will say this much. He had more than one nice play at the World Juniors. I thought what I saw, Grumpy, he does a good job with his ability to stick handle and control the puck. I thought he excelled in that area. And he showed flashes where I was like, wow, that's kind of special. I saw his economy of movement. I said, okay, at moments, that was special. I saw the offensive creativity, and at moments I said, all right, I like the thought process. Again, he wasn't really able to execute on a few of the opportunities he did have, but again, I like when you're talking about a young man, and again, I think he's a young 20-year-old man. Some 20-year-old men are physically mature. They've been mature for years. They're fully grown in their body, and they've got a lot of strength to them. I think Simon Holmstrom's still continuing to grow physically and to grow into that role. So I think, again, I like that I was able to see flashes, but I expected a little more, to be honest. And I think, again, like as Corey Proman said, it was a disappointment. We talked about that on our last podcast. People called us crazy because when you look at the point production, he had, I think it was 6 points, 1 goal and 5 assists, or maybe it was 5 assists. Okay.
He had no goals. He just had 5 assists, 4 of which were secondary assists. He had 1 nice assist. Okay. For people who didn't watch the World Junior Championships, he makes Michael Del Cole look good. That's all I have to say. If you're happy with Michael Del Cole, well, he's better than Casper is. I mean, I expect nothing from him. His skating isn't exceptional. There's nothing about him that stands out except that how invisible he gets out there.
We've also had a comment here from Tommy said, I wish I would have known Grumpy during the Radek Martinek years. LOL.
Another guy that we just kept around. And here's the thing. Every bad team has to have players, but he stuck around like the plague to that guy. I mean, think about how many years Radek Martinek played for this franchise. Every year is like, well, if Radek Martinek is still on this team, we need better defensemen. But he played for like 9 years. I don't understand. You know what? Like I said, he's like a scam. I mean, that you keep picking at all the time. It just doesn't go away. I don't know. Yeah.
Grumpy old man.
I remember Radek Martinek.
Grumpy. Yes, I can only have imagined a podcast with you during that time period. That would have been some real rough times, Grumpy.
I'm much more calm now than I used to be. Much more relaxed and reserved.
That I find that hard to believe, grumpy old man, but I'll take your word for it. Too much pessimistic King also says Grumpy's going to talk about Tomasino, Kaliev, McMichael, and I agree. Grumpy, I'm shocked and I'm happy. We were unable to get you on the bingo board for bringing up we should have drafted XYZ over Simon Holmstrom, and we were going to leave it at that, Grumpy, because I don't want you to hit it just because I brought it up for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we discussed them last week. And they certainly outplayed Casper. Absolutely, every single one of them.
Yeah, Grumpy. And I know we're going to have another we're live streaming today, Grumpy, but it's also important to mention live streaming tomorrow with Rich Pallon, special guest, one of the most underrated Islanders of all time. Rich Pallon's going to be on the podcast too and the live stream, and I'm looking forward to it, Grumpy. I'm sure Grumpy old man's going to be much more docile. It's going to be more of a information gathering section. I know, Grumpy, you have been formulating some questions for Rich for quite some time, and I know I'm looking forward to hear what you've got to say question-wise, Grumpy old man, and I'm looking forward to getting a chance to go ahead and talk with Rich Pallon for certain.
Just suffice it to say, I'm not going to ask Rich Pallon what his favorite color is, or what color, what his drapes look like in his house. It's not going to be anything like that. We're going to talk about hockey. I'm going to talk about his career, and I do have some questions lined up, and it will be a little bit. I don't foresee myself ranting at all tomorrow.
I'm glad, grumpy old man. We're not going to go on a grumpy old man rant tomorrow.
Oh, you know what? No, you never know. Rich could say something that could really set me over the edge. I doubt it. I mean, I feel he's going to be like more in my vein, honestly.
Now, I kind of want. There was a few more things. Oh my goodness, there's a few more things, grumpy old man, that I wanted to talk about for today's podcast and live stream. Now, as we're getting closer to the start of the season, I think we could start looking towards expectations we have. And I think one of the biggest questions that we have going into this season is how will Ilya Sorokin perform? And again, it's always nice when you're seeing, in interviews after practice and scrimmages, where Scott Mayfield's saying he's quick as a cat, he's everything as advertised. That's always reassuring. You'd like to think that they're not going to go ahead and falsely, pump airs in somebody's tires. But I think if Sorokin, again, can perform the way that Islander fans expect and the way, talent evaluators and people who analyze that type of stuff expect Ilya Sorokin to perform, I think we are in for a pleasant surprise, grumpy old man, because having an absolute rock back there, I think will bring us back to some really, really good hockey. And you talk about the Islanders want to win every game 1-0. Well, Grumpy, that looks more and more like a possibility with Sorokin in that if he's everything as advertised.
I've seen some highlights of him just from practice, and I am excited. I'm going to temper my enthusiasm because he's never played in a game in the NHL. That said, he is real smooth back there. Really, really smooth. What I would like to see happen with him is that by the end of the year, he's the undisputed starter. That's what the goal should be. I mean, he's 25 years old. I want the pleasant. This is what I'd love to have happen. Where at the offseason, gosh, we got to sign this guy to like $7 or $8 million a year, because that means that he really showed up this season. And I'm not going to tell you what I think his numbers are going to be, because anything can happen. But I think that he's going to get a lot of playing time. We play 56 games. I would love to see him play at least 30 of the 56. And that means that he would take over as the full-time starter by the end of the year.
Exactly. And, the playoffs, God permitting, the Islanders do make the playoffs. He would be playing the lion's share of games there in the playoff picture. And I'm going to also say we got a whole bunch of comments. With the live stream, it's going to be nice because as you do have questions, you can submit them and comment them, and we'll make sure that we go ahead and relay those to Rich as well. So we're getting a lot.
Nothing stupid. Don't say anything like, the grumpy old man. Hey, what do you think about the grumpy old man? He knows. He's going to know the grumpy old man is like, a hockey legend. He knows.
Well, Grumpy, he's already got to know you're a hockey legend. He's not going to learn, right? Grumpy already knows, right?
That's what I just said. He already knows that.
I've got questions he's got to ask about Millberry. Oh goodness, Grumpy old man. I'm looking forward to that live stream.
I have a lot of questions, and I want to ahead of time. I want to thank Rich for doing this for us because he's just really a stand-up guy. So, and there's a lot of things that I certainly want to ask him. And it's going to be a lot. I can guarantee you it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to ask some fun questions, but some in-depth questions also. So it's if you want to listen to the podcast, I mean, everyone that the Grumpy Old Man on is great, but when you listen, it's almost a must listen to Rich Pilon tomorrow.
Yeah, Grumpy Old Man. Well, I want to kind of get back though to Sorokin because I think ideally you'd like to have him. Just like you said, if he's earning at least $7, maybe $8 million a year, he's done everything we wanted him to do, and he was everything as advertised. Ideally, he's going to earn more than Varlamov if he's played successfully. And again, there might be an issue too, right? Because if Sorokin plays extremely well and he's going to command at least $8 million a year, right? You're going to have a goalie tandem that you're paying a little over 13 or close to $13 million a year, and that long term might be a little bit of an issue there when you talk about cap space.
Well, I understand why Lamarillo signed him. I mean, even at the time I said that was a bad signing, bringing Varlamov in for that dollar amount, and I understand why he did it. And it seems like it certainly paid off. I don't know if Sorokin would have come here otherwise. So the fact that he did, it accomplished something. So I'll look at that as a positive for Lou. But you don't want to be paying your backup $5 million a year. I'm just going to tell you that.
That's what I was about to say, right? And again, I'm not. If it comes to it, Grumpy, I think he will maneuver something around that. I mean, I'm not sure what you'd have to give up to offload Varlamov, who would be, in an ideal scenario, a backup goalie making $5 million a year. But I think, it would have to be done at that point. But you're right, Grumpy. You don't want to have to be paying a backup goalie, even if he's like a 1A goaltender, $5 million a year.
Maybe he'd have to move Noah. Maybe he'd be willing to move Noah Dobson to get Varlamov's contract off our books, like he did this year, just so we can keep a bunch of the old guys, to play pinochle and stuff in the back on the plane rides.
Oh, Grumpy, man. Oh, Grumpy. But I've got to ask you, Grumpy, what's your expectation realistically for the Islanders this season? I know we'll probably get more in depth into that, but I mean, first take, what's the expectation for the Islanders this year, Grump?
Okay, my biggest concern is without Devon Taves, who's going to quarterback the power play? It can't be Nick Leddy. I'm sorry. It cannot be Nick Leddy. He won't shoot the puck. To me, Noah Dobson is the answer there. He's willing to shoot the puck. He has really good vision. And I'll tell you what, he doesn't take the big slap shot, but every time he puts the puck on net, and that should actually help out Anders Lee down low. Absolutely, it should. I mean, you want to have Kulak on the other side. I mean, because I'm sure you want to put him for a shot. But here's the thing: if Oliver Wahlstrom somehow makes the team, I'd love to see him in that spot. Somebody as a trigger man, like he had with Ovechkin the one year they won the Cup in Washington. I mean, that's the way they run their power play, and I'd love to see that. But I can't see Nick Leddy on the first power play unit. I just don't think he can get the job done. So that worries me. I mean, our power play has not been great the last couple of years anyway, and I think it'd be worse with Nick Leddy at the top.
Well, Grumpy, I'm going to play devil's advocate. I'm not sure the power play could get worse, Grumpy old man. Our power play's been hideous the last 2 seasons. And again, like any type of change, I think hopefully will bring a positive result. I think also adding a little bit more offensive acumen there on the forward position would always help. I think more gifted players possibly on the offensive side of the puck, like a Wahlstrom, would help out ideally on the power play. You talked about who would be on the number 1 power play. I think in practice today it was Nick Leddy. I think that on the second power play line, I think Dobson was on there or maybe took a few shifts out there on the ice. Grumpy old man, you're right. I think if Dobson's on the power play, I think that does increase, I guess, point production for Andersley. We've talked about it before. Andersley does a great job of parking himself in front of the net, screening the goalie, and being able to redirect those shots. Again, that type of style is not conducive for a guy like Matt Barzal, who likes to skate around and use his ability, to cut the edges and and make crisp passes to go ahead and get somebody in the right spot to have a tap-in goal. That's what Matt Barzal excels at, and necessarily doesn't cater to Andersley's game.
Until we get more guys with a shoot first mentality on the power play, we're still going to struggle. We got too many guys who flat out won't shoot the puck.
Well, we did something to address that, I think, last year before the trade deadline. I think Jean-Gabriel Pageau, and again, didn't play a lot in the regular season, only played 7 games in the regular season, I think. I think he does have that shoot-first mentality, and I think that hopefully we'll see more positive results in our power play during the regular season with also Jean-Gabriel Pageau out there.
He was on the second unit, though, as I remember, which I'm fine. I like J.G. Pageau out there on the power play. I absolutely do. But, I mean, when you have – let's say you have Bailey and Letty – I mean, they will not shoot the puck. It makes it so much easier to defend. And I don't think either of them is a great passer. I mean, I think they're good, but I don't think they're not Gretzky good or anything like that, or Doug Waite in his prime, or guys who are known as passers. They're just not. I mean, Brock Nelson plays on the second power play unit, correct? I'm going to tell you what. Here's a hot take from the grumpy old man. If you have 2 power play units and one of them contains Pageau, Dobson, and Nelson, that's going to lead the team in scoring on your power play. At the end of the year, you're going to see the second unit be more productive than the first.
Well, I have an interesting idea here from Tommy. Again, grumpy old man. I'm not necessarily opposed to the idea. Dobson and Pulak will be the first line power play with Pulak in the Ovechkin spot. I would not be opposed to that.
What I just mentioned before. Absolutely, I have no problem with that. None at all.
Again, the biggest thing about Pulak is he's just got to put the puck on the net. Unbelievable shot, great power, and when he puts it on net, man, oh man, it's tough to stop. But that's always been the biggest thing for him, and you'd like to think maybe one day he's going to be more accurate there with that shot, and he's going to put it more on net more often. But again, we have yet to see that yet. Hopefully, we can make steps towards that this season.
It's funny because I don't know what his off-season regime is, but I remember Ryan Kessler had the same. Kessler was a forward, played for Vancouver and Anaheim and stuff like that, and really a hard-nosed player. I loved Ryan Kessler, but he had trouble putting the puck on the net. So in the offseason, all he did was shoot pucks on the net down in his basement or something like that, and he became very proficient putting the puck on the net. And that's the underrated thing about Alexander Ovechkin, right? Great shot. He always puts the puck on the net. Always. It's so underrated. I mean, if you shoot the puck 100 miles an hour, you put the puck on the net, you're going to generate, a
rebound opportunity for somebody else to go put the puck in the net.
And I would hope that he's been practicing from that spot. I think they are going to put him there. They had him there last year. I'd like to see that continue. And if he's better and they put Noah Dobson up top, then we can really make some noise on the power play unit.
Grumpy old man, we have a comment here from Dave. Does Ladd join Boychuk on long-term injury?
He should already be there. They should have strong-armed him to do that. Absolutely. Here's the thing. He hasn't earned his money. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but
he's a very nice guy. I'm sure he's not a very nice guy. Most hockey players are very nice guys. And again, and I'm talking about a nice guy, at least from where you see they do the little promos of the charity, and when he speaks about it, seems like a very outstanding man.
I say that because I've never met him.
Okay.
But I have no doubt that he's a nice guy. But you know what? It is a business, and he's played how many games in the last 3 years? It's something you have to go to him. Hey, this is what we want to do, Andrew. Can you work with us here? You're going to get your money. He's not going to play for this team. He's not going to. They should have done it already, and that would have freed up their salary. That would have. It meant they could have kept Taves, and they could have signed Barzal to the long-term extension, even after bungling last year's free agency. They still could have got that done. But without that, they're up against it salary cap-wise, and it hurt them with Barzal, honestly.
Well, I've got a comment here from Brush, and you and I both 100% agree with this, Grumpy old man. I think we've talked about this off air too. Hutton is still a sleeper to make the Islanders. Grant Hutton, I expect his game to still continue to move forward, and I think he will be an Islander. I don't think he's a guy who's like a 4A player. I think he will be part of the Islanders in some capacity, if not this year, next year for certain. And it's funny, right, Grumpy Old Man? I'll tell you one thing. The Islanders have an uncanny knack of being able to draft defensemen, or at least Barry Trotz. I'll tell you, it's either one or two things. The Islanders do an excellent job drafting defensemen, or Barry Trotz does a fantastic job of catering the system around to the defenseman he has. I'll tell you, Grumpy, it's almost like a seamless transition. I know we talk about how much we probably will miss Devon Taves, but I'm going to tell you, really, with that, minus Adam Pelech, any defenseman goes down, I feel very confident in the system and Barry Trotz's ability to find that replacement who can go ahead and fill the shoes.
I'm going to disagree on the Adam Pelech part, because we absolutely fell apart when he.
That's what I said. Besides Adam Pelech.
Oh, okay. And I don't think. But here's the thing: I put Pulak and Pelech. That top pairing is fantastic. Honestly, I'm going to tell you what I can see by the end of the year. Our second pairing being Dobson and Green. I think they play extremely well together. I think Grant Hutton is going to be fantastic. We are loaded with young defensemen, and that's why it bothers me. All right, I didn't mind that we lost Devon Taves, even though he's going to star in Colorado. Mark it down, write it down. You heard it from the Grumpy Old Man first. He is going to absolutely star in that system, without a doubt. But I didn't mind them moving on from him, but I wanted them to get something that could have helped the team, and they didn't do that. That's my frustration with moving Devon Taves. I think Nick Leddy is finished, but I think we have so many guys coming up behind us that we might struggle a little bit in the short term, but in the long term, we're going to be okay defensively. You got to remember, we still have Bodie Wild, we have Sebastian Aho. I mean, we have so many. I mean, overseas, you still have Robin Salo. Yeah, I mean, last year, before his injury, Mitchell Van Sompel was a guy who was picking up a lot of steam. That Islanders organization was like, we have so many young defensemen. I know you already mentioned Sebastian Aho, but he's another guy who could seamlessly transition in and out, in my opinion. And Samuel Bolduc. You're leaving out Samuel Bolduc, he's going to be really good too. Really good.
I was about to say, right? And that's the thing. We have so many young defensive prospects that are good and talented. Just a little bit on the offensive side of the puck. I think we are a little weak in that organizational depth-wise, especially when it comes down to Bridgeport. Again, I still feel confident there in the Otto Koivulas, the Kiefer Bellows, the Wallstroms. I do, Grumpy Old Man. That's just my opinion on it, though.
Okay, but the whole thing, even if they do make it, those players, right? Are any of them high-end talents? Maybe, and I'm saying maybe Wallstrom. Maybe Wallstrom. But where are you going to put him? You have Eberle signed for 4 more years. You have Lee signed for 6 more years. You have Nelson signed for 5 more years. You have Bailey signed for 4 more years. You have Anthony Bavillier, who has to be signed. I mean, there's just unless you move some of those older players out, what opportunity is there for the younger players? That's my concern. And that's always my concern about signing guys who I consider, ham and eggers or jags to long-term extensions. It limits the upward mobility of the younger players. And that's always been my concern.
Grumpy. We got a comment here. Scott saying, TJ, I like the Stanley Cup looking water jug. Well, it's a funny.
And see, let me tell you something. TJ is always ripping me for my internet and saying that, my internet stinks and it's always my fault. I don't come off the hip and get better internet. But I'm going to tell you what, it's been TJ's internet that has been going out the last couple of weeks. And I'm going to bag on him big time, because even after last week's podcast, he was blaming me for, I said, TJ, I couldn't hear you going in and out. He's like, oh, it's your internet. Your internet sucks. And I'm like, no, it's you, bro. And then he went and he listened to it, and he actually had to apologize, if you could believe it, for blaming me and my internet when it was his lack of internet access that cost us. So, TJ, why don't you tell us again go right from the start of the story, because I had to cover for your bad internet issue. And I want you to tell us about the Stanley Cup looking jug and how it all came about.
Yeah, Grump, I will say my internet, I almost made it the entire time without any issues.
I have already buried your internet. Don't worry about it. Just get to the Stanley Cup jug.
Well, so you're telling me it's not worth the $65 I pay a month for it, Grumpy?
I don't care what you pay. I'm just telling you that I took care of that problem. Don't you worry about it. Tell us about the jug.
This was a gag gift that I had received at 64 ounces, I think 64 ounces, but the intention was when I go to the beach, I like to drink wine. So like that's my drink of choice. So I could fit a family size bottle of wine, which is just like the 2 bottles of wine. I could just pour it in there. I don't have to worry about the bottles because some beaches don't allow bottles. So the intention of this gift was originally so I could just pour a family size bottle of wine in it and I have to worry about, the bottle or anything like that and possibly not being allowed to drink on the beach. So, but it doubles also as a great way to stay hydrated.
I've never heard of this thing called a family-sized bottle of wine. I mean, that sounds like a jug to me. I mean, 64 ounces? That's pretty big. Who the hell drinks that much wine in one sitting?
Oh, Grumpy, I do, Grumpy old man. It's just it's a good time. Wine, I like drinking wine, Grumpy.
I mean, how big is a normal bottle, a normal human bottle of wine? I mean, I don't know. I don't drink.
Just kidding. So
okay.
I just get the big one. I just get the big one, Grumpy. And I get the cheap little, I think it's little cheap barefoot wine, like $13. And no hangover, and you feel great the next day, Grumpy old man.
We just learned too much about TJ, I'll tell you that one.
Grumpy old man. I will say this, though. We're getting a few comments here about the power play last year, and this is from Robert. It says, our power play didn't look bad in the postseason. Bottom line is that we need a go-to guy. Hiller is too good of an assistant not to improve our power play. And I think having a go-to guy would be optimal. If we were able to have that go-to guy, I think we would see a lot of those power play issues disappear and dissipate.
We don't have the talent on the power play. I've been saying it for years. A long time you were blaming Scott Gomez, and I'm like, it's not Scott Gomez. It's the lack of talent. And it's still a lack of talent. And until we get more talent, it's not going to change. And that's why I'm hoping Noah Dobson would bring something fresh. If you ever watch Noah Dobson, he puts the puck on the net, right? All the time he puts the puck on the net. He is really good back there. Here's the thing. I'm going to guarantee you they think he's too young to be on the top unit. But, as long as they wake up, maybe Lou will give me another call and say, what should I do on the power play? Because what I've been doing has been failing. What should I do, Grumpy old man? And I'm going to tell him, put Noah Dobson on that first unit. Yeah, you might be a little bit rocky to start, but everything's about the playoffs. You want to have that kid ready to go as your top power play quarterback come playoff time. Because he's just smooth back there. He's fast enough where he can get back if any mistakes happen. He can play defense. And if they have Pulak at that OV position, and honestly, that's not optimal either. You want a real shooter. And that's what hopefully Wahlstrom can develop into that. Like I saw Kaliev play that role during the World Championships. And he was real good at it. I mean, really good. But if we can have Wahlstrom take that spot as a trigger man over there, I feel much better about this team. Like rolling the same guys out year after year, I mean, you're not going to get any different results. I don't care who the coach is.
Grumpy, yeah, and you're right. I will backtrack before you kind of went on that monologue. I did think that Scott Gomez was one of the reasons our power play was unsuccessful 2 seasons ago. Wound up being wrong. It was not Scott Gomez, and Scott Gomez had a lot less of the blame to carry. It was as opposed to the actual cast and crew on the Islanders that deserved more of the blame.
Players win games. It's not coaches. Coaches can lose you games, but players win you games. I'm going to tell you what, Barry Trotz has gotten the absolute most out of this team and this group of players. I don't think you can get any more out of them, honestly. I mean, I just don't. I don't think we're talented enough to go any further than we have.
And that's one thing that really good coaches do. They're able to go ahead and maximize the ability of players. And we've always said this since day one. The sum is way greater than the parts right here in New York for the Islanders. We also have a comment here from Robert again. He says, what about Bodie Wild as a sleeper? Barry Trotz mentioned a few good words on him a couple of days ago. And I have a weird thought about this, Grumpy. I wonder, I think he, number one, has stepped up his game for certain. I think he was unsatisfied with how things transpired last season, right? He got hurt right at the beginning of training camp with that high ankle sprain, and it kept him out, I want to say, for better half of 20. It's kept him out all the preseason, and it kept him out for at least 20 games down there in Bridgeport. Or maybe it was like 10 to 20 games, and then he was never able to get up to speed with where he wanted to be, and he, was sent back down there to the Saginaw Spirit. So I think he was really unsatisfied with how everything transpired, and I think he came motivated this offseason, and I really hope those words are true there by Barry Trotz.
Yeah, I don't think he has any shot of making the team this year, and I'm absolutely fine with that. For him to make the team, he'd have to undo all the bias that Barry Trotz and Lou Lamoriello have about younger players, and I just don't see that happening. That said, that high ankle sprain, which is a really tough injury, particularly for a defenseman. Think about it, with all the stopping and starting and turning and every other thing, it derailed his whole season. It really did. I was glad he went back to Saginaw and was sent down, because he wasn't getting the ice time that he needed up in the A, because he missed all those games. And I just want to see him progress in the AHL this year. That's my goal for him, to really step up, because I think Sebastian Aho is going to be on our taxi squad, which gives him an opportunity to step up defensively at Bridgeport.
I think I'm not sure taxi squad, healthy scratch. I think Aho is going to be up with the Islanders in some capacity. I don't see him in Bridgeport. I think Hutton also has a chance for that. Grumpy old man, I think you're right. Bodie Wild does need, I want to say, probably an entire season down there in Bridgeport. Again, he's a young defenseman. I want to see him be able to establish that confidence and continue to build on what I guess Barry Trotz has seen so far there in training camp. Again, I know a lot of people are writing him off, and people were worried a little bit. I think I had a little bit of worry too, Grumpy old man, when he was sent down and demoted. I wouldn't say demoted, but he was sent down to the Ontario Hockey League in the Saginaw Spirit after not really finding his groove there in Bridgeport. I mean, that's disheartening to see there for fans. I'm sure it was disheartening for him, but it's great to see that it looks to see that he has picked back up that confidence that he had.
Yeah, it didn't bother me at all. I remember you mentioned it, that you were concerned about that, where I never really looked at it that way. The injury did him in last year. And you got to understand, when he came back, I mean, even if you come back, you're not 100% healthy. That's a long-term injury. And like I said, if he wasn't going to get the minutes there, best to send him back down to Saginaw, get that confidence back up. And like I said, if last year, if they had that option with no adoption would have been up with the big team. He would have been down in the A. So I have no problem at all with him going back down to juniors last year, but I would hope that he'd step up his game this year.
Well, Grumpy old man, we have a comment, and it's here from New York Rangers Pack. What makes you think the Islanders will make the playoffs, Grumpy? I have to assume this is a Rangers fan in some capacity.
No, because I'll tell you why, because the Rangers are in that division. So there's an automatic 8 wins for us.
Grumpy old man.
Good enough answer for you?
Grumpy old man feisty. But no, he did elaborate on it before you jump too much down his throat. With 8 teams in the division this year, only 4 teams make the playoffs. It's going to be tough to make the playoffs. We talked about this last podcast, and I think this is true on the live stream too. We talked about it. This division is going to be, I think, the most competitive top to bottom division in all of hockey this season. And I think the amount of points that separates the 3rd best team in the division from the 7th best team in the division will be minute. It's going to be very, very close. It's going to be neck to neck. So again, if you do have those issues, or you struggle at one point in time during the season, it's going to show, and it's going to be magnified. So having that consistency and having that structure to where you don't lose, the highs aren't too high and the lows aren't too low, is hugely important. Mm-hmm. I know last year, right, this sounds like a little hypocritical there when we talk about the Islanders making it, and I just brought up that point, right? The Islanders were high as high could be when they had, I think it was a 17-game point streak. And, before I guess right before the hiatus, we were on a 7-game losing streak, right? The very lows. Grumpy old man. So, but that's not usually how things work on a Barry Trotz team. And I think there's a lot of reasons why we did hit those lows. And Adam Pelech was a huge factor as to why we did struggle during that time period.
Well, also the fact that we have one of the older rosters in the league. And I'm still a firm believer that if the season wasn't put on hold last year, we wouldn't have made the playoffs. And I think NYR Pack, I think their farm team is the Wolf Pack, I believe. But I mean, you're right. I think there's only 2 guarantees for playoff spots this year, being Boston and Washington. and I think everything is up for grabs after that. I think you're right for, and I'm not going to consider Buffalo, but I would say you have the Rangers, the Islanders, the Penguins, and the Flyers fighting for those last two spots.
Grumpy, now we have a comment here from Too Much Pessimisticking. And dude, I hate to say it, but the Rangers are going to be good in the future. I don't think any Islander fan likes to admit it, but really, I think the Rangers are set up where they're going to have a lot of offense. It's about defense, right? I mean, the goalie Shesterkin's obviously the rock they need back there in net. It's about filling out with talented defenders now that are going to play the system that you need. I mean, they definitely have the offensive ability. So I think it's all about, hey, can you go ahead and put the defenders around them in order to be successful?
Yeah. 2 years ago, maybe 3 now, I remember when Ranger management came out and said, hey, we're tearing it down and starting over. And they did. And they
hold on, stop real quick. Do you remember the fans were freaking out because they were right on the edge of being a playoff team? And I remember, I think, if I do remember this correctly, Ranger fans were livid. Some of them were saying, yes, this is the right choice to make. Lundqvist is at XYZ age. We can't expect him to continue to hold down the fort much longer. But remember, they were right outside the playoffs. I think they were they're right outside a wild card spot when they went ahead and made this determination at the trade deadline. And I remember there was a lot of confusion out there.
And they had a lot of older players on their team. And they decided we're going to be sellers. We're going to start over. And it was a smart move. It's always the smart move. The Islanders are going to be there before you know it. Within the next 2 years, we're going to be in the same boat. Seriously. Look at the age of the core players on this team and the contracts. Look at the fact that we don't have a whole lot of young players in our system, with the exception of defense, moving up. I mean, I think the Rangers are in good position. I mean, I haven't seen Laferriere play. I don't think he'll make the team this year, the number 1 draft pick in the draft. But I think, and Shesterkin looked great last year in the amount of games that he played. I think it was 22 games. But I'll be interested to see how he plays this year without – I don't think they have a veteran backup. I don't know who it is. But with him taking a full load on, how is he going to respond to that? It is I would say it's his first full year in the league. So there could be a little bit of drop-off there. But defensively, I don't think they're as strong, certainly not as strong as we are. But their offense is definitely good. Signing Panarin was fantastic. I wish we had him.
Well, Grump, really quickly to wrap up there, NYR PAC, it just stands for the New York Rangers and the Green Bay Packers, Grumpy Old Man.
Okay.
We do have a comment here also from John. Well, John says, thoughts on where Otto Koivula and his progression is at this point. And he also told you earlier, I'm not going to pull that one up, but he said, take off that Devils jersey, Grumpy Old Man.
As soon as the podcast is over, I take the jersey off. I did it to make a point. And hopefully you were here at the beginning to hear the elegant execution of my point.
Oh, Grumpy Old Man. Too Much Pessimistic just chimed in also saying again that Georgiev is the backup.
Okay.
I was about to say, that's right. Georgiev did manage to play really well against us.
That's right.
We should definitely have known his name. But Grumpy Old Man. Now, Otto Koivula, I think this is a big year for him, right? This is now year. I think they kind of bounced him around in Bridgeport last year. Majority of the time he was at center, but he did play a little bit more at wing. Remember, if you take the clock back 3 years ago, he was just primarily a winger, or he started off his Bridgeport career there as a winger. And after he made that transition to center, that's where you saw the point production in his play increase. Again, he spent the full year down there in Bridgeport. And last year, he spent the majority of the time down there in Bridgeport with that small abbreviated chance up there for the Islanders. But he's a guy where you'd like to see him starting to take the next steps this year. And it's unfortunate, right? And the way our team is currently lined up, there's no real center spots open. And maybe that's why they were giving him a little bit of, I think, a few games back there at wing last season, was because with bringing Jean-Gabriel Pageau in an optimal situation when everybody's healthy, Matt Barzal is the number 1 center, then Brock Nelson's the number 2 center, Jean-Gabriel Pageau is the number 3 center, and Casey Cizikas is the 4th line center. I mean, everybody but Casey Cizikas is signed there for at least the next 3 seasons.
Right. Now, Casey, I think this is his last year.
This is his last year before he becomes an unrestricted free agent. Okay. But, in an ideal scenario, you don't want an Otto Koivula to be a 4th line guy.
Well, but I think he maxes out as a bottom 6 type player. So if you could do a lot worse than have Otto Koivula as you got to remember, our fourth line plays a lot. They play a lot of shutdown. They play a lot of penalty kill. So, I mean, if that's the route they want to continue playing, I have absolutely no problem with Otto Koivula slotting in next season as the fourth line center. Absolutely none. I mean, I just think JG Pageau is better than he is.
I was about to say, Jean-Gabriel Pageau, I'd put him up there as one of the best third-line centers in all hockey. As a third-line center, for certain.
Absolutely. And Brock Nelson is better than he is. You notice I didn't call him the C word this week. And Matt Barzal. I mean, those are just three better centers. But if he could be a fourth-line center on this team, you're going to get, 11, 12 minutes a night of ice time. And that's a good situation to be in. But I don't think he's going to progress any further than a bottom six guy, honestly. I don't think his skating is good enough.
I'll tell you this. I think in an ideal scenario, I don't think Otto Koivula is a fourth liner. I think he's more of a guy who's around a third line guy, but can occasionally play on the second line when need be. I think, again, he's a bigger body. I think his skating is not great, as you mentioned. He does have offensive skill around the puck, the grumpy old man. I've seen it. He does have good stick handling ability, and he's got that creativity on the offensive side of the puck. I like that. Now, we're getting comments in, grumpy old man, that's saying, be ready for the Islanders to re-sign Cizikas, grumpy old man.
I talked to you off air this week, and you want to see me lose my mind? Let's sign another 30-year-old to a contract where he's already making almost $3.5 million a year for a fourth line center. You want to save money. You want to get better on the high end of your team. You cannot be giving your bottom line players $3-4 million a year contracts. Just can't be doing it. I love Casey Cizikas, but guess what? Move on. Put the young players on that team. Indoctrinate them into the system. That's what they should be doing in the minors anyway. They should be getting the young guys ready so they can seamlessly slide in. So you don't have to sign the older players to long-term, the golden parachute that they like to give every veteran on this team. You have to move past that if you want to really win Stanley Cup.
And Grumpy, I guess, last comment here. It says, and the only reason I'm doing this as last comment perhaps is because it's funny. The Islanders trust Otto Van Bismarck more than Otto Koivula because of their respected ages. I knew that you would get a kick out of that, Grumpy.
I did. I find that amusing.
Grumpy old man, is there anything else you want to say before we kind of wrap things up? Obviously, tomorrow is going to be another live stream there at 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Rich Polon's going to be on, ex-New York Islander. But Grumpy, is there anything else you want to say before we wrap things up today?
No. Well, actually, I often say that, PJ's a big proponent of coaches are more important than players, where I am definitely in the player is more important to the success of the team than a coach. A bad coach can lose games, but good players win teams. And you'll get to see that tonight when Tom Brady leads the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to a playoff victory over Washington, while Bill Belichick is sitting home crying and whatever he eats/drinks. It's pretty obvious at this point that Tom Brady and Bill Belichick's the greatest NFL coach of all time, but Tom Brady covered up for a lot of Bill Belichick's player acquisition mistakes. He was a spackle for the whole team. You take him out and you're stuck with 7-9 and missing the playoffs when 7 teams make it. So
I'll tell you now, Brush has always wanted you to wear your Buccaneers jersey, obviously facetiously, grumpy old man. He just figured you were a Buccaneers fan, but
I'll tell you what, when Tom Brady wins, then I'm wearing my Tom Brady shirt tomorrow.
No, come on, Islanders. Grumpy, I want you to wear some Islanders garb tomorrow. I'll tell you this much, grumpy old man. You're right. I am a believer in coaches are more important than you think they are, Grumpy. I don't think they're king, but I can tell you one thing. When you're at the upper echelon and the tops of the top levels, there is really not that much that differentiates players. There isn't. I mean, there are players that are unbelievably talented and head over heels better than everybody out there. That's true. I believe it. But I believe in a lot of situations, in a lot of cases, like we've seen with Brock Nelson, right? What did it take for him to move up to being a bona fide, true number 2 center? Took a coaching change. And that's a lot of people overlook that type of stuff all the time, grumpy old man. A good coach can get a lot more out of a player than just having a whole bunch of talent around and not being able to execute successfully and turn that talent, cultivate it into a successful team.
You could argue that Brock Nelson never had a coach before Barry Trotz. So I kind of, and he has absolutely, I mean, any player who's flourished under this system and improved his stock, it's Brock Nelson. You'll never get an argument from me on that. But I need to ask you a question. When was the last time that a coach threw a touchdown pass? When was the last time that a coach sacked a quarterback? When was the last time that a coach scored a game-winning goal? When was the last time that a coach made a game-winning save? The answer is never. So at the end of the day, players win games. I don't care. A coach can make a team better, but you need players to win championships.
Grumpy, I'm not going to deny that you need a few very, very special and gifted players on your team. I'm not denying that. I'm saying for the majority of the team, they're all interchangeable. We've seen it, right? I mean, think about our team, Grumpy. Think about how many guys you call Jags, which stands for just another guy, and how many guys you think are bottom six forwards, right? All those guys are interchangeable. And you know what doesn't change? The coach. You know what happens? Next man up. We've got guys like, I forgot his name.
You lose one player on defense last year, and your season goes in the tank.
Hold on. That's like saying you lose a guy. To us, Adam Pellick was an extremely important player, undervalued by most, but an extremely important player. If we lose Matt Barzal, grumpy old man, what happens? If the Washington Capitals lose Alexander Ovechkin, grumpy old man, what happens? If the Pittsburgh Penguins lose Sidney Crosby for an extended period of time, grumpy old man, what happens?
I guess
it's the same. It's ubiquitous across the board, grumpy.
But you're proving my point. Thank you.
No, Grump. I'm not proving your point. Every single team needs to have, number one, optimally, you want to be healthy. Number two, grumpy old man, they have to have a star player or two. It's really hard to win unless you don't have one of those game changers. But after that level of the game changer S-type player, all the players, for the most part, are relatively interchangeable, grumpy old man. Who, and I'm blanking on his name. We talked about him last year. I think you had known the player personally, grumpy old man, that the young man who was a center, played an overage guy, kind of came up when he was 25 or 26 years old, had to fill the role, I think, as a fourth line guy. Cole Barzal. That's right. Cole Barzal, for example, right? Stepped up almost like a seamless transition. Again, he wasn't Casey Cizikas, but it's not like, oh, wow, now that Casey Cizikas, our fourth line center's out, what are we going to do? Cole Barzal stepped up, filled the role.
That's my whole point. Cole Barzal didn't step in and fill Matt Barzal's role. He came in and he filled the fourth line center role. So why honestly would you pay a fourth line center $3.5 million when you had somebody fill in just as admirably who made league minimum? See, that's my whole point. That's my whole point. And here's the thing: what happens when Tom Brady leaves? You realize Bill Belichick has never had a winning season as a coach.
Hold on.
Quarterback.
I want to stop you. That's why we agree on things like the Casey Cizikas situation. We're just on opposite sides of the camp, but we see the same exact on that exact point, Grumpy, on points like that. I'll be interested to see what happens. Oh, Grumpy, I'm going to tell you one thing. You're going to be a big fan of this New York Rangers, Green Bay Packers. Can't wait to see Brady go down against the Packers next week. Grumpy old man, I know you're a big Brady fan. But Grump, is there anything you want to say before we wrap things up?
Is that the Packers team that got stomped 38-10 early this year against Tampa? Is that the same Packer team or is it a different Packer team? Organization since week 6? I don't know.
Grumpy. Is there anything you want to say hockey related? We're going to be back on the live stream tomorrow. So it's not like you have too much time, Grumpy. In less than 24 hours, we'll be back on air there with Rich Blonde. But what do you have to say before we wrap things up now?
Yeah, I think everyone should listen to tomorrow's podcast. We're going to have a lot of fun. There's going to be some lighthearted questions. If anyone else has questions, please bring them to the table. I know they won't be as good as the grumpy old man's questions, but hey, don't set your goals that high. What can I tell you? But whatever you have, I mean, Rich is more than willing to answer pretty much just about anything, and he's a straight shooter. So you can't ask anything more from a guest.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Grumpy Old Man, for being part of the podcast as always.
My pleasure.
And thanks so much, everybody who participated here in the live stream and listens to the podcast. We do love being able to interact there with all the listeners there on the live stream. But thank you guys for tuning in, and thank you, Grumpy.